Hello and welcome. We will continue our discussion on guideposts by talking for a time about the tarot. The tarot is a set of symbols generally depicted on a deck of cards, but it could just as easily be in the form of a book or even a grouping of pages. It was created for the same reason that other such disciplines or forms of study were created, and that is to teach, through the use of symbols, some of the information contained in ancient truths that have been around for much longer than most people realize. Some of these truths are the same one that are taught in alchemy, the Kabbalah, the Holy Grail legends, and other branches of the same tree of knowledge. Among those important truths are included the following: that God is, and that God in being is the source of all. That there is a duality, both positive and negative, in virtually all of existence. That this duality, with the use of variations in vibrational frequencies, accounts for virtually all existence on the material plane, and may I suggest probably on other planes also. That human beings, having come from God, choose to incarnate here on this planet to help them learn the things that they need to know, so that eventually they no longer need to return here, but can return to the source from which they came, but return in a state more perfected than the state in which they originally left. That these human beings reincarnate here time and time again as a part of the normal process of learning the lessons that are needed from here in order to continue to advance on their journey back to God. That we, at a higher level, choose our parents as well as various life circumstances, situations, and persons with whom we come into contact. We sometimes say that we are drawn to these. This will then give us the opportunities that we will need to correctly make the decisions necessary to eventually master our lessons here, so that we no longer need to continue repeating the cycle of reincarnation on this planet, even though we may choose to reincarnate here from time to time after that in order to serve. That in order to complete our return to God in the most perfect manner possible, we must eventually be successful in our quest to attain Christhood through living by the example that others before us have set. The cards in the tarot deck, with their symbols, represent not only such truths as these, but also various aspects of the different stages of human development, or even some aspects of the different situations that we must meet and master in our lives here. We're destined to continue to meet these life situations until we successfully learn the lessons involved. In other words, master those aspects of life here and continue to go on to other lessons until we have completed our needed time here and may no longer need to reincarnate on this planet. The symbols used are designed to impress upon the consciousness of the student the meaning and importance of the principle or principles involved. It's not necessary for the purposes of this video to discuss each symbol and its meaning in detail. There are numerous books that can serve that purpose. Some of those books agree as to the meaning of the various symbols, while some do not. The principles and truths being taught by the use of these symbols, however, are a much more important aspect of the tarot. Even more important, though, is whether those who use the tarot correctly learn those principles and truths. To become involved in discussions of which books are correct and which are not would be a distraction from the more important work of learning the principles and truths involved. An even more distracting aspect of the tarot is the temptation to become involved with the use of the cards solely for the purpose of divination. Some may believe that divination is in fact the true purpose of the tarot cards, but the true purpose has already been stated here. In addition, it should also be said that using the cards for divination tends to teach people to depend on the cards rather than teaching them to go within to their own higher self, where their information is received from a source that is more in keeping with a continuing forward-moving journey on the path, rather than getting stuck at a way station along that path. Using the cards for divination also tends to have the connotation of wanting to know the blueprint of one's life ahead of time, rather than taking the higher road that is willing to accept life as it comes and to let thy will be done. Additionally, there's the fact that it's not really an exact science at all, but it's very subjective, and therefore the results of divination tend to be only as good as the skills and intuition of the person doing the reading. Finally, on this subject of using the tarot for the purpose of divination, it should also be said for those who will insist that they must have a tarot reading so that they will know their future, that not everyone who seeks a tarot reading will be fortunate enough to find someone to read for them who is conscientious and caring about the subject of their reading, as much as, or more so, than the amount that they will be paid for doing the reading. Once again, let this be a word to the wise. Remember that all of the various disciplines that are at this level of study are designed, through the use of symbols and other means, to increase the knowledge as well as to impress, educate, and raise the spiritual consciousness of those who seriously study them. The information and principles involved are given in order to reduce the number of errors made by the seeker, to accordingly reduce the number of incarnations necessary here without sacrificing the learning of needed lessons, and thereby to bring the student or the seeker closer to the source, which by any name given is still God. As you may have already perceived, there is considerable commonality within these various schools of thought or disciplines that are used as vehicles for the study of esoteric teachings. That commonality is due to the fact that these different schools of thought all have the same ultimate purpose: to increase the spiritual knowledge and consciousness and understanding, and thereby increase the spiritual development of sincere seekers. The ultimate goal is to bring about inner change for the seeker to the point that the seeker becomes more and more Christ-like. The number of incarnations needed by the seeker may be substantially reduced if needed lessons and knowledge can be obtained through these studies and through other studies with similar purpose. Don't misunderstand. If this all sounds too Western, that's only because the speaker is from that background, although I'm not a member of any organized religion. If the speaker were from the Middle East, or the Far East as they're called here, the information would likely be saying words to the same or a similar effect, because religions all over the world tend to have similar goals. Goals that include helping one to transform the inner and outer person to reach the highest spiritual state of which that person is capable. That's why teachers and avatars, in other words God's messengers, have been sent to various societies and peoples throughout the ages. They've been sent to oversee a time period that generally approximates one age, which consists of approximately 2160 years. These statements are not made with the intention of offending anyone. It's simply a way of saying that the principles involved are universal and are not restricted to any one faith or belief or time period, although many who follow these faiths and beliefs would not necessarily agree with that statement. There may also be many who feel that it is impossible today to attain such a high spiritual state. If you have access to a Judeo-Christian Bible, however, you will be able to see otherwise. The universal Christ Spirit, who had created a state of oneness with the Master Jesus, taught that greater things than those which had been done would be done. This is stated in the Judeo-Christian Bible in the book of John 14:12, and the meaning is as follows: that which the Master Jesus, the Christ, had attained, and even greater things, others could and would attain also. It would be worthwhile to state here that contrary to the understanding of many followers of Christianity, this does not exclude Christhood. Most people who have read that biblical verse do not realize that such things, although rare, are still possible today. The various schools and disciplines, both historical and modern, have tried and are still trying in a veiled way to impress upon the consciousness of sincere seekers that there's a higher life, a higher way of life, a higher path. That path involves, as time goes by, more and more of service and less of self, and that significant spiritual advancement may be, can be, and should be sought and attained to whatever degree the person is capable in the incarnation in which they live. Not all persons are ready for this degree of work and study, however. Fortunately, there are many levels of endeavor along the path, some of which are of such a subtle nature that those who are there are unaware of the fact that there even is a path or that they are on it. Many times such persons simply feel a sense of restlessness of the spirit that may cause them to be seeking answers at a time when they may be uncertain of even what the question should be. The writings which tell us that we can only come to God through Christ are not telling us anything more than the fact that if we wish to complete the ultimate return to God, the source from which all comes, and to do so in the most perfect way possible, then we must each do so through the Christ, by attaining a state of oneness with the universal Christ Spirit, and in other words, through the attainment of Christhood. This doesn't mean that we must live the same life or do the same work as the Master Jesus. It does mean that when and if we prepare ourselves through right thinking, right speaking, and right living in every way necessary, through many, perhaps almost countless incarnations, we can eventually become one with the universal Christ Spirit. We can become Christed. We can attain Christhood. The alchemical search for the philosopher's stone is a search for Christhood. The journey up the Kabbalistic path from Malkuth to Tifereth is a search for Christhood. The search for spiritual development that takes the seeker along a path through the various principles taught by the symbols of the tarot is a search for Christhood. Even the quest for the Holy Grail is a quest for Christhood. This search is described even in Dante's trilogy, The Divine Comedy, where the hero sees the souls wandering through incarnation after incarnation on this earth, creating, through wrong thinking, wrong speaking, and wrong living, their own living hell, committing the same errors and causing themselves to relive the same hellish conditions again and again, until some of them eventually begin to think and see and realize that there must be a better way. When they finally begin to seek that better way actively, they find themselves beginning the climb that will bring them out of the inferno and start them on that long, difficult path spiritually upward, from one level to another, mastering the human weaknesses of this life, one after the other, purging themselves of life's dross during their difficult climb through and out of purgatorio, until finally, after struggling through many incarnations, a few of the small number who started reach the mountaintop and are allowed to enter the garden. There they meet a still higher spiritual guide, Beatrice, who is later seen to be Mary, the mother of Jesus, but in truth and reality is symbolic of the Holy Spirit, and who takes them by the hand and carries them to still higher levels of spiritual attainment as they continue to seek Christhood in their travels through Paradiso. Dante was inspired to write thus so that his readers might know the way, and when the proper time comes, be able to find that way for themselves. I found an interesting article in a newspaper several years ago. The article stated that a woman whose job it was to translate ancient texts had been terminated from her employment for, in effect, feminist thinking, and allowing that to cause her to translate the person of the Holy Spirit in the feminine gender. The poor woman stated that she had merely translated the ancient text as it has been written many years ago. Of course, she and the ancient texts were correct. The Holy Spirit is feminine in nature, and it has always been so and will continue to be so. Neither my thinking nor anyone else's can change that. It may even be suspected by some that perhaps the Catholic Church uses Mary as such a prominent figure within the Catholic faith in order to symbolize in a veiled way the feminine nature of the Holy Spirit. It should also be pointed out at this time that the Trinity in Christian teachings is not without parallel in other religious teachings. I suspect that there are a number of beliefs that incorporate a Father, a Mother, meaning the Holy Spirit, and a Son within their teachings. The Egyptian teachings about the personalities of Osiris, Isis, and Horus are only one such example. You may know of others. As it has been written here previously and stated here previously, these truths are universal and are not restricted to any one belief, faith, or time period. If you now understand the idea that many people, over many centuries, have used many different methods to act as guideposts to teach a few very important truths to those who seek to walk the path, then enough has been said for now on that subject. I thank you for watching. You are encouraged to continue by watching the next video and the subsequent videos in this series. Again, thank you very much.